Every time I go into a bookshop and I see one of these tropes on the back of the book cover, I put the book back straight into the shelf. I read the blurb, I spot the pattern, and I feel like I already know what the story is going to be, and that simply isn't interesting to me anymore. So I want to walk you through 5 fantasy and romantasy tropes that I am personally done with, and also give you a few book examples that I'm talking about. But I also want to tell you what I would like to see instead, and not just whine about what I don't like. And at the end, there's a bonus trope that I thought I wouldn't like at all, and I found myself thoroughly enjoying. That was really surprising to me, so stay tuned for that in the end. Let's go. Trope number 1 is witches and wizards. Yes, I know, witches and wizards are probably part of the foundation of what makes fantasy, but I'm really done with a certain type of story, the one where there's a coven and there's a witch society and rivalry and that certain type of passing on witch knowledge with books and spells. I feel like this has been really done and I don't need to see any more of that. I didn't let that turn me off from reading the Black Jewels trilogy by Anne Bishop, and I should have actually liked this series because it is dark fantasy, has morally grey and interesting characters, but I got hung up again on that world that is so focused on social climbing, hierarchies, power struggles between witches that I got really bored again. It feels more like political fantasy to me. That is not something that I really enjoy, and that's probably why I'm not a big fan of the witches and wizard trope. What I would like to see more of instead is different kinds of magic systems that are not so focused on that classic spell type of wizardry that you see in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, for example. Something that comes with different constraints and it maybe is even a bit more dangerous. And I have a perfect example here for you. That is the Bartimaeus saga. I love this story. It is about a type of wizard society that shows the wizards themselves as rather powerless. They can only gain their power, their magic, if they manage to enslave extremely powerful and dangerous demons that then do their bidding. So this is much more dangerous. There are higher stakes and it feels more exciting to me. So I would like to see more of this type of book when it comes to the witches and wizards trope. On to the next trope, the academy setting. I know there are lots of brilliant books that use this trope. Like, I mean, a lot of people love, of course, forgot the name. A lot of people love Fourth Wing with their military academy. I did read the Crave series by Tracy Wolff, and of course, Scholomance by Naomi Novik is brilliant. That's where a school is basically actively attacking its pupils, its students, trying to kill them. And I found that, well, that really made my dark fantasy reader heart very happy. I love this series. But hear me out. If I just pick up a book and all it has is academy setting and nothing special to it, then I'm really not gonna pick it up. Because this is something that may be very relatable to all of us because we all go to school, we all maybe go to university even, and we know this setting. It has this social structure that works, that brings people together, that also causes a lot of conflict, that is really a great setting. But it is quite also unimaginative, if you ask me. And that already brings me to what I would like to see more of. Why does it always have to be school? Why not an apprenticeship? I can imagine a magical carpenter workshop with apprentices. I think that would be really cool. Or if there's an academy, why does it have to be a building? Why not a hot air balloon, a caravan? My God, anything, a seashell. And the next one is Greek mythology retellings. And there have been a lot of them. What should I say? I grew up on Greek mythology. I was lucky enough, I had a dad who read them to me at night as bedtime stories. And later in school, we also talked about the famous myths and we learned about the gods and all their shenanigans. I'm just not very excited to hear the same stories over and over again. I know that a lot of these retellings have been done from a female perspective to add something that has been missing in the original versions. Just quite often when I read those retellings, I don't feel like they're their own stories. I just feel like, okay, it's now from a different perspective, but there's not really much different. It's not very exciting to me. So I'm not a fan of those, and I feel like, the way they're being done at the moment, I don't want to pick up another book. There is, of course, one exception, one of my all-time favorite authors. She's a classic. I think the special thing about Marion Zimmer Bradley is that she really makes it feel like a completely different story. She does not just retell exactly the same thing from a female perspective. No, she tells the whole life of her characters always. And she makes these stories sound so fresh that I wouldn't recognize, like, you would hardly recognize them. They're so different. And what I would like for this trope is maybe some more retellings of other mythologies. Why does it always have to be the Greek mythology? There is so many mythologies in this world. Couldn't we do more Celtic mythology, Sumerian or Japanese, African mythology? And I find it very limited to only focus on the European, to only focus on the Greek mythology. And the last trope that I'm bored with is vampires and werewolves. Well, ever since Twilight, I haven't really been excited with this anymore. It seems quite done, especially in romance novels. And I tried to read Bride after it has been such a success. It was quite disappointing because the story is rather slow, and that supernatural element of vampires and werewolves, especially when they're enemies, it's just nothing new anymore. It really, yeah, it's quite predictable at this point. That's why I do not need any more of that. Couldn't they be in a different sort of relationship? Maybe not an enemies to lovers story, but, you know, come up with something new. Just because some author decided that this is how it is at one point doesn't mean that every other author later has to replicate that. And I'm not here to read any more stories of vampires and werewolves being enemies. Another thing that is completely underused is the interesting aspect of immortality. I know they're all just romanticizing eternal life like eternal love, which is fine for young adult novels probably, but not at that age anymore, and I do not want to read these very rosy-eyed interpretations of immortality. The idea of having to outlive all of your friends, all of your family members, is terrifying. It would be really hard to find meaning in life if your life is eternal. Yeah, so I think the vampire trope is predestined to dive into philosophy and deep thinking if it's not just centered around romance, and I want more of that. If you stayed all the way till the end of the video, I want to tell you about one trope that I actually enjoyed, even though I thought I never would, and that is dragons. Fourth Ring actually does dragons surprisingly well, because it doesn't show them only as weapons, even though they are, of course, part of the army there, but they are much more creatures of wisdom that are not like humans at all, and that's very noticeable. They are much older and do not have all these qualities we love in humans, and that's exactly why I like them. They're kind of unpredictable, dangerous, and yet they're friends with humans. This creates an exciting tension that makes the whole story of Fourth Ring much more interesting, in my opinion. Now, I would love to know which tropes you are tired of and which ones you actually really enjoy in fantasy and romantasy. And if you have been listening all the way until here, I might as well introduce myself. I'm Effi. I'm a dark fantasy writer with a literature degree, and I love creating imaginary worlds to get lost in. If you like to escape into stories, you might feel at home here. I'd love to welcome you on my channel. And I hope to see you in the next video.